Congratulations. You've just been born into the world of Kendall Roy.
Oh, okay. So I'm inserting myself into my mom's vagina now? Is that what's happening?
Cold and inhospitable. Seems to check out.
We knew early on that we wanted to have this sort of birth canal entrance into the fantasy wild rave part of his party. We all started putting our heads together about how that could work, and we settled on using inflatables, which was something none of us had worked in before, but it seemed to be able to give us the scale for these legs that we wanted that, wouldn't take up the entire stage. The idea with the legs originally was that, you walk out into that sort of hospital part of the set, and you would then walk into a set that was a nursery in which there was a giant overscale crib and, toys from Kendall's very young childhood blown up into giant scale. And they sort of walk through the crib while people are passing out cocktails and baby bottles and things. That scene ended up on the cutting room floor. And that was the reveal where you look back to where you came from and see how big the legs were. And unfortunately, it was like the punchline to that joke kind of got edited out. So hopefully people are able to sort of see enough, and maybe it's better living in someone's imagination anyway.
Party! It's my birthday!
Obviously, there's, a line that you're trying to walk between funny, graphic, but not too graphic. Where is the kind of the sweet spot of humor versus, slight provocation? For me, a big part of it was sort of, what is the scale of it? You start with a human walking out of a tunnel, and that tunnel needs to be shootable to camera. So that sort of says, okay, that gives us a certain idea of what the size of that's going to be. And from there, we were able to send these computer models out to a company that fabricates large inflatables. And they were able to take those and say, like, yeah, we can do this, and it'll take this long and cost this much. And, pick your pink and, we'll have it for you by this day. We really wanted it to sort of have this luminous quality. And so we tested, different prints on different fabrics to get the right sort of pink that would light a certain way. There was a fair amount of thought that went into making it work. And the legs as well. They're not like balloons. If you turn off the air being pressed into them, they just sort of like and fall on the floor. So we had to remote all the fans and pumps to somewhere else that sound wasn't going to freak out.
Are they playing from the approved playlist in the main room? Because my thing was all bangers all the time.
How much time did you have to, turn those sets around?
The specifics of the episode, we didn't really get fine-tuned scripts until quite close to shooting time. And we went through a series of conversations about where the party would be set, whether it was going to be New York City based or, for a long time, there was a pitch going around that it was at a, sort of an arts institute, in out of state somewhere. We settled on sort of hubbing it at the Shed, which was a new arts performance gallery space as part of the Hudson Yards development. Then what we ended up doing is sort of designing on our stages a maze of rooms that could be configured and reconfigured while we waited for the writers to figure out exactly what the key elements were, room to room to room. I remember taking, my handy buck slips of paper here and literally like folding them like this and setting them down on my desk in a series of like shapes and made this little maze and, did some curves and did some things and cut some holes in some of them. And I was like, okay, that's going to be the framework right there. And I called Marcy in and I said, like, see that? That's going to be the framework. And so we started drawing based on this maze that I had literally just assembled out of buck slips on my table, because it was like, we kind of had to start drafting it that afternoon.
It just feels like an asshole's birthday party. And my thing from the very first meeting was that it shouldn't feel like an asshole's birthday party.
It was designed to have multiple ways that you could circulate through, and to be deliberately confusing so that you could be in one place twice and not ever realize you had been in that place before, once the dressing had been changed out and the specific qualities of the room had been reallocated. The interior of the treehouse, the exterior of the treehouse, where Roman and Shiv aren't allowed to pass a certain line.
Yeah.
There was the compliment tunnel. And there was one other thing that all came really late. And we were like, okay, we're going to need another phase. And so I designated a certain series of the sets to be things that we would strike really quickly. one area that we wouldn't shoot in the first phase so we could start working on a part of the treehouse. And then I just said to, Scott Ferguson and production, I said, if you guys can just go away and shoot, I think it was part of the Adrian Brody Long Island episode. If you guys can go and shoot that for like 5 days, that'll give us the chance to strip this out, put in the new stuff. And when you get back, we'll have a new set of 3 sets for you. And that's how we got our last few sets in. But it was all very quick.
You've just been born into the world of Kendall Roy.
Go on, tell us who's here.
Who isn't?
Your dad?
Your mom.
Your wife and kids?
The treehouse was, one of those little love notes from Jesse and the writers that almost gave me a heart attack, because I think the first I heard about the treehouse set was about 2 weeks before we started shooting the episode. And we were pretty much maxed out. All our stages were filled with all the other things, but they sort of wanted this new extra VIP level. Marcy Mudd brought in some really fabulous research. We were all kind of scratching our heads thinking, what can this be? And she brought in some research of an artist who works in wood strips called Kavanaugh. And that and some other pieces of research inspired us to try to do this self-illuminating tree sculpture that would be a center point for what might feel like a treehouse terrace and then a bar that leads out onto it and so forth. I jumped in my car and went out to a prop shop that we'd been working with on some other pieces and asked if they had time to help figure this out. And they did. I would split my time working with our shop and then running out to that shop. And they helped create a kit that we were able to bring over to the stage and then assemble. And so we augmented it with projections of real tree branches onto a big spike that was behind it. Then, of course, there was the rest of the set, which was a combination of references from real sort of super fancy resort tree houses and so forth.
I actually got something from Dad. We hope you like it.
There are a lot of rooms that were either ideas that never happened or ideas that did happen and were filmed in but didn't make the edit because our scripts tend to be pretty long. And checking in with Laureen, the director of that episode, she said the original cut, I think, was 15 to 20 minutes over what it needed to be. And so, everyone has to kill their darlings to some extent. At one point, there was a teenage room, which they said, oh, we won't do that. And then, of course, they wanted it later. And so we ended up quickly putting together the teenage room. I think actually Jeremy Strong really, really wanted to do that one. Almost had them write a scene so that he could do something in his teenage room. And then that one didn't make the cut either. So, it's not just for me. It's like that for Jeremy too.
Good night.
The very last scene for Jeremy, when he and Naomi are on his balcony and he's sort of like the party's fizzling down below and he's had a horrible time and he's wrapped himself in a blanket. I think it was an A-team blanket that we got clearance to let us shoot. And I'm not sure it makes sense to anyone else why he's wrapped in this A-team blanket, but it was something that he had taken from the teenage bedroom set and wrapped himself in as he left the party. And that never got aired. But there was this sort of like moment where you saw that and maybe it gave some sense of things that the audience hadn't seen. Maybe it doesn't make any sense to anyone, but